Okay, hello ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Mind the Music. This is a podcast with me, and today I'm going to be talking about, as you can probably guess from the title, why was I so engrossed in doing the Ghost God series. Now, if you don't know what I'm talking about, I suggest looking at my channel and taking a look at the three main tracks, Ghost God, Scrap Freak, and Scrap God. Now, when I started doing Ghost God about 6 months ago, I really enjoyed it, and I thought it was one of my favourite tracks, to be honest. I love listening back on it now and thinking, oh my god, this track was actually, it was absolutely amazing, because there was a lot covered in that track. It was inspired by a deadmau5 track, but it was remixed by Nom de Strip. It was called The Reward is Cheese, and it had like these really cool like laser blip sounds. It was just full of energy, and it gave me like the best inspiration that I needed to make the track. I just finished I made EDM using only a water bottle, and I thought, okay, we need to kind of make a new track now. And I consider this the first track that I did before actually going back to I consider this the first track that I made when I started second year. So I thought it was pretty good. I loved the doing the vocal sections, which was using like an automatic voice generated thing, but I put like a bit crusher and a bunch of effects. I tried to mix it in with the track. I thought it was pretty good. And then the actual drop, I loved the drop because it was this one solid bit of sub bass. There was the actual like the blips. I spent literally like all day when I first started doing that track. I spent the whole day doing Ghost God. I mixed everything within one day. Literally, I came up with the idea in the morning, and I spent the whole day doing that track, and I finished it within a day. I did the mastering in the morning the next day, and then that was it. The track was done, and I was really gassed about releasing that track. I was super happy with how it turned out. Now I listened to the original, I think there was definitely a lot of stuff that it was missing, right? I really enjoyed doing the cover art as well. I thought that it looked quite professional. Not the best cover art in the world, but no cover art ever is the best cover art in the world, if that makes sense. So then after Ghost God, a couple of tracks came after that. So there was Nucleophilic, the Azazel VIP mix, Crisis, Sriracha drum and bass edit, Future Smash, He Won't Talk. There was a December chill out mix, which was pretty good. And then I decided to do another track because I found a sort of Melbourne house bounce sample, and I thought, oh my god, that sounds really good. So I started messing around with this sample that I found. And I thought, you know what, I could probably turn this into a track. So I did. I experimented with a new Melbourne bounce style that I've never really done before, but I really enjoyed like the style. And I've listened to a lot of stuff like that before, and it's just full of energy and it's really enjoyable to listen to. So I did that. And I was looking for like a really cool title to go with, and I thought, well, a large chunk of my projects end up becoming scrapped, right? And a lot of what I use are scrapped loops, and I thought that makes me a bit of a scrap freak. So that's kind of where the title came from. And then the cover art is just, I don't know, it's just a bit of a Mad Max style like idea that I came up with, a bit freaky, a bit weird, like with the goggles and the face mask. I ended up having to actually buy those two things, so you can't say I don't invest for these cover arts, even if it is a bit pointless. But I really enjoy doing Scrap Freak. On the channel, if you click on the Scrap Freak video on my channel, the rendering isn't particularly great. But it's still that's not what it's about. It's not about the rendering, is it? It's more about just listening to the track, and the audio quality is still okay. The best quality you'll find is actually on my phone, because I always export really high quality so I can have them privately on my phone when I listen to them on iTunes. But I think for everybody else, commercially, the best quality tracks you can get are on Spotify and SoundCloud, probably. I'm pretty sure, yeah, I put it on SoundCloud. So I really enjoyed doing that track. It had a lot of enjoyable elements to it. It's a bit old now, so it's about 4 months old. And then after I did Scrap Freak, I did something called the Scrap Freaks Mega Mashup 2019. So that was also 4 months ago, roughly. And that consisted of, so obviously it started off with the new Scrap Freak, which was very enjoyable at the time. And then that kind of blended into an October edition of Ghost God. So then, again, that brings up another thing. So I did another version of Ghost God. Why did I do that? Well, October came up, and I thought, you know what I want to do? I want to edit Ghost God a little bit, because I realised that it actually wasn't how I wanted it to turn out. I was listening back to it, and I thought, you know what? When I was actually mixing the track, and I was listening to all the grittiness and all the blips, and I thought, this isn't exactly what I wanted. This isn't how I wanted the track to turn out. So I wasn't really sure what to do there. So I decided to go back into Ghost God, and I decided to edit it a little bit. And that's what I did. I created a sort of October edition specifically for Halloween, and I uploaded that exclusively to the Wave platform, which unfortunately is shut down now. But I think I've still got it somewhere, even though I'm probably not going to use it because I've got a better edition now, which I'll explain later on. And I included that edition in the Mega Mashup, which is something that I really enjoy doing. I really like putting the updated and kind of slightly tweaked versions of my tracks into my mashups and my mega mixes because it makes them more enjoyable to listen to. You'll see my mega mixes on my channel and you might think, oh, why would I want to listen to this? This is just a compilation of your tracks that I've already heard. If anything, this is just kind of spamming your tracks in a way. We don't want to keep hearing the same tracks. Well, that's the thing. A lot of the tracks that you hear in the mashups are actually not the same. They've been edited slightly. It's almost like an exclusive hearing. So that was mashed up with, I think it was the VIP mix of Azazel and Crisis and Future Smash, because those were like some of my favourite tracks at the time that I all mashed up into the mega mix. So this Scrap Freak mashup, I think it was a bit weird because I've created this character now. The Scrap Freak has sort of become a character, and all it is just me wearing a pair of weird goggles from KSI's Creature, and also like a face. It's like a neck scarf that like a really scary biker would wear, because you can see it's got teeth on it, and it's coloured in a weird way. And I always over process the photo. I don't know if that's the best thing to do. But I just much prefer doing it because it makes it seem like really scary and vibrant at the same time. And then after the Mega Mashup, I did the collab with VP the Mac. Then there was the Old and Gold mix, the end of year video, a couple of remixes, another mashup, the weird Thomas the EDM Engine thing. And then after that, I came up with an interesting idea. I said, you know what I want to do? I thought it was a bit ambitious at the time. I said to myself, I feel like the best thing to do now would be to mix Ghost God with Scrap Freak. And I thought, oh my god, Scrap God. I was kind of confused. Originally it was going to be called Ghosts versus Freaks, but then I thought Scrap God was probably just a better idea. But I did keep the Ghost God versus Scrap Freak in the title because I thought, I don't want to get rid of that because that is still pretty good. And I had a lot of fun doing the cover art as well. It was literally like a full body shot of the Scrap God, kind of being like all mischievous and powerful, with a little bit of Ghost God, with a little bit of the Ghost God element in the background. I thought that was pretty interesting at the time. Honestly, Scrap God, I really, really enjoyed it. It was so much better mixed than Ghost God, but it was still a bit broken. There were still a few bits and pieces here and there, which weren't quite what I wanted them to be. So I was thinking to myself, I finished the track, I exported it, I uploaded it to Spotify, and I was happy with it. I was promoting it, and a lot of people really enjoyed it. I remember one guy on this site that I use my stuff. There was this one guy. So I promote my stuff on a website called Submit Hub. It's a very famous, I want to say very famous. It's not very famous, but it's a place where people like myself, smaller artists, will go to kind of promote their stuff. And I remember putting Scrap God on there. Loads of people really enjoyed Scrap God, apart from one guy who just said that it was trash. And I'm pretty sure, it's not trash. Let's be honest. Scrap God is amazing, right? And it was funny because he said that, and then someone instantly came and just defended me and be like, well, yours isn't exactly any better. At least he actually put some effort into his music. So I was really thankful for that, because it shows that even if it isn't the best track in the world, people can see that there is a good amount of effort into it, and they don't like it. I'm the same. They don't like it when people just say this is trash and then they don't give any reasons why. It's much better for us as producers to hear proper criticism from the people that listen to our music. It's just irritating when people just say, oh, this is rubbish, and that's it, that's all that they say. I don't want to hear that. I want you to tell me why it's rubbish. That's so much more important to me. But I felt like I kept listening back to Scrap God, and I felt like, again, this isn't perfect. This really isn't perfect. None of my mixes are perfect. None of my mixes are amazing. There's definitely some that I'll keep listening to over and over again, thinking that I definitely mix this really well, and that there isn't much I'd want to change about this, right? That would take me a long time to go over. Maybe that'll be a future podcast episode. But I was listening to Scrap God and I'm thinking, I feel like I've not done this properly. The sub bass in Scrap God was a bit broken. Like, I always struggle with mixing sub bass, and again, this is something I'm going to cover in the future when I start looking at when I start going into my tracks and taking them apart and explaining the problems that I've had. Sub bass is definitely one of the biggest problems that I have when it comes to mixing tracks, because it's just one of those things it's really, really hard to balance, because the lower down you go in frequency, the easier things phase. And what I mean by that is because bass waves are really, really big. So it's much more likely that they will cancel out with other waves, if that makes sense. Whereas waves that are more higher frequency won't really do that, because it's far less likely that they'll phase with stuff. But bass is just much trickier to work with, and that's that's especially true with me, because none of my monitors are particularly bassy. All I've got when I in terms of my speakers, I've got like these hi-fi speakers which I use to monitor my stuff with a stereo image, but they're not very bassy at all. They're actually very trebly, which is good, and it's also good for creating that, that typical stereo image. But it's not great when it comes to mixing bass. The closest things that I've got for mixing bass pretty well are these tiny Sony earphones that I've got, and if you push them in just right, they get a nice bit of bass on them. But again, that's not really enough. So I have to keep kind of experimenting with the bass and trying to get it so it's just right. People have said to me in the past that the bass is normally never a problem, so that's normally really good to hear. But I was really pleased with how Scrap God turned out, but at the same time there was a lot missing, and I just wasn't sure what it was. I wanted to go back and do it again. But before any of that happened, I did another couple of tracks. So a month ago we did Honeycomb, a remix of Keep Up Forever, which was amazing. And then I got a bit bored and I realised my channel was it just seemed a bit empty, and I thought, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to do a retro remix of Ghost God. And I thought, you know what? Yeah, why not? Let's do it. So I did that. I didn't expect that to do very well, because it's less than 2 minutes, and it's not the typical theme of my channel. But a big shout out to Deco the Dragon, aka Tom, for actually helping me render that video, because he knows how to actually give proper retro visual effects, whereas I can't do that because I only use either Windows Movie Maker to render my stuff, or if it's a typical music render, it will be using Resolve, but it's the free version of Resolve, and there's certain things that you have to pay for, which I'm not going to do because I don't have the money. But then I think one of the best things was, after that came the Dragon Tree remix of Ghost God. Now you might think, well, why did somebody remix that track? Well, it's not because he wanted to. I'll be honest with you guys, it's actually because I asked him to remix the track. I messaged Dragon Tree. I said to him, I really want you to remix this track of mine, right? And he's actually gotten a lot better when it comes to the track, but it did take him a really long time. It actually started off as a sort of the actual remix of Ghost God started off as a kind of Electro-House track. It was almost bass house, but I'm just going to call it Electro-House. And in fact, if I can find the sample, I'm actually going to play it right here in the podcast. So this is what the original Dragon Tree remix was going to sound like.
Some time to talk, Tyler. I've been waiting for this for a long time. Now, allow me to introduce myself. Who am I, you ask? I am the Ghost God. There is no escape.
I tried to get in contact with him later on, but he kind of never really responded for quite a while. I think he was going through a lot of tough stuff. But then eventually he had plenty of time to work on it. He was sending me little samples here and there, and I was able to give him feedback and kind of help him kind of tweak it a little bit, which is actually the best way to do it. And then eventually he sent me the final product, and it was absolutely fantastic. Legit, he smashed that out the window. It was brilliant. So I rendered that. He also really liked the cover art, which I was really glad. Whenever I do cover art for somebody doing a remix of my track, I always Literally, it's pretty much the same cover art, but I kind of tweaked the colours a little bit so it looks a bit more unique. So you can look at that and think, oh, it's Ghost God, but it's green and purple, so it must be Dragon Tree's remix, yeah? So you'll have that sort of identification when you see that, and he really liked it as well, so I was glad about that. It definitely fit the theme as well. It was this hard, horrific dubstep track, and I think it just worked quite well. And then I thought, you know what I'm going to do, because I've done this track so many bloody times, I'm going to just mix it into one big mega mix, which is a mixture of the new version of Ghost God, which is the upgraded edition, which I'm going to talk about in a second, plus Scrap Freak, Scrap God, which was a new edition of Scrap God, which again I'll talk about, and then the Dragon Tree remix, and then the Retro remix. So, because I thought, this is at the stage where I thought, I've done this track so many times, people must be getting sick of it, but now it gives me an opportunity to actually mix them all together in a sort of set, which was only 11 minutes long, and it was only a couple of weeks ago, 4 weeks ago to be precise. And it didn't do particularly well on the channel, and to be honest, I don't expect it to. I never expect it to do well if it's a mega mix, which is fine. I did try and advertise it a little bit, so it did a little bit better than most of my mega mixes, but yeah, no, it didn't do as well as I hoped. So I basically went back into the original Ghost God mix, right? And I decided to try and tweak it a little bit, because again, there was a lot that I wasn't happy with. I can't stop listening to the track and thinking there's definitely something wrong with this track. And in particular, with Ghost God, it was the sub bass, right? I just couldn't, I had to try and go back into it so I could fix the sub bass, because I just wasn't happy with how the bass turned out. It was just getting on my nerves. So I spent a really, really long time. It was in the library at UEA. What I do is this is going to sound really random, but whenever I want to study, I'll always go up to the top floor of the library. If there's space, I'll go into one of the main sections, get my laptop out, and I'll either do revision or I'll be doing some music. And usually if it's music, I'll actually go like really, really late in the evening. So I'll have these study sessions where I'll go from 8 o'clock in the evening after I've had dinner and done whatever else I've needed to do. I'll just pack up all my stuff, go to the library at like 8 or 9 o'clock in the evening, and I'll normally come home at like 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning, because I find that for some reason I'm most productive in the evening. And that works for literally everything. That works for revision, it works for coursework, and it works for music as well. I just want to get stuff done. So I'll come to the top floor, I'll sit down. If it's in the evening, there's no one about, so it's really nice. It's really peaceful up there. It's annoying because it's obviously in the library, it's dark, so not in the library, but outside it's dark, so you can't see anything to kind of give you inspiration. It's nice to in the day to be able to look outside like among campus and kind of get inspiration like that. But when it's night like that, you have to kind of squint to see outside, so it's not ideal. But no, it's really nice to be able to sit up there and kind of work on stuff productively. So that's exactly what I did with Ghost God. I opened the track back up again. Normally, if I finish the track, it takes me quite a while to get the mix working, and I'm pretty sure Ghost God was one of those mixes that really started lagging out my laptop. Like, it gets to a point when I have so much in a track, my laptop starts to really, really grind to a halt. Usually my laptop's not so bad, because I think I've got about 8 gigabytes of RAM, which is decent for music. It's not really enough, it's not really sufficient, especially for like EDM, but it is enough to get especially if you do it properly and you don't kind of waste tracks, then it's definitely enough. My processor could probably be a bit better. So my processor on my laptop is an i3. It's an Intel i3 that runs at 2 gigahertz. It's a dual core, but it has 4 logical cores. So it's not the best processor in the world. I imagine a few years ago people would have been super impressed by that, but right now you can probably look at it and think, i3, that's really outdated, and you're absolutely right, it is. So I think in the future when I get a laptop, I'm going to try and aim for a few bits and pieces that are a bit better, but even if it costs a bit extra, it will be worth it in the long term. So yeah. So as I was saying, so I opened Ghost God up, and I just wanted to focus on the sub bass, right? I like tweaking the mix here and there, seeing things that don't really work, especially when I'm most productive and paying the most attention to my tracks, right? But the biggest thing I wanted to change was the sub bass. Now, the sub bass is, as I said before, sub bass is ridiculous to mix. I hate mixing sub bass because it is hard. It is hard to mix. Especially if you're not experienced when it comes to mixing it. Now, in terms of experience, I am definitely not the most experienced person, right? But I've done it plenty of times. I've done it enough times to know exactly what I've done wrong. I can listen to my old tracks and say, this sucks, basically. There was no sub bass, or there was, but I didn't do it properly enough. such is the case with tracks like, for example, I'll Never. You could hear the sub bass in that track, and that was actually mixed pretty well. But other tracks like, I think Hidden Hearing is a good example. That, in general, that wasn't a good track, but the sub bass in that was pretty poor. I remember somebody telling me it doesn't need to be the loudest thing in the track, it needs to be well balanced. But a tiny little bit of light distortion needs to be added. So that's what I do whenever I do sub bass. Tiny bit of light distortion, a tiny bit of OTT, just to push out the low end, and also again balance it out a bit nicer. And if I'm mixing multiple sub basses, which if you do that, I'd be very careful because they can phase, which is a big problem. Then what I do is I just put a compressor on the top of the whole thing. So I can make sure that they're mixed properly. And honestly, I feel like I'm not really doing it very well, so I'm going to have to go back and revise the way that I do sub bass so I can get some better ideas. So that's the thing. But I spent quite a long time in the library, just focusing on the sub bass for a couple of hours, and eventually I finished it and I produced something that I was actually really happy with. I remastered it as well, so I went back into the original master project and changed all of the masters completely from scratch, and it was a lot better than the original, right? To be able to compare the tracks would be quite difficult, right? But the newer version of Ghost God, which I labelled the upgraded edition just because I thought it was a cool title, and because it was true, it was upgraded because it was better. I thought, honestly, the actual the bass in that is just so much better. It was just in your face, whereas the old one was just a bit dead if you compare it to other tracks. But if you listen to the Ghost Squad, if you listen to Scrap God in the Ghost Squad mega mix, you will notice that in the drop, the sub bass is actually really poor. Like it's really bad. Like it's just fuzzy. And it's not mixed well at all. It's not really sub bass. It's just fuzzy bass. It just doesn't work, and that's because I went back into Scrap God and tried to redo the sub bass. And again, because I didn't really know what I was doing, and I kind of rushed it a little bit, I ended up just ruining it. Basically, I just kind of messed up the sub bass in this new version of Scrap God that I was doing, and I just didn't like it at all. It was just awful. So if you go back into the mega mix, you will hear that. And again, that was just annoying for me because I don't understand how I could have messed it up so badly. So after I was done with that, I didn't want to go back into it again. It was still on my mind, but I carried on with some other stuff. So the next stuff that came along was a couple of weeks ago. I uploaded Beholder, which I really enjoyed. It was quite generic, but I really enjoyed the mix in that, and a lot of other people did as well. I also did another Scrapped Projects video, which again I also enjoyed because it's one of those things where it shows that I'm more than just a producer. I'm someone that can actually produce content on the channel. Then there was Ultra Core, which has done quite well, and I particularly enjoyed that as well. Currently it's doing quite well on Spotify. Then I uploaded Surge, and then a day afterwards, which I think is about a week ago now, I did the Lockdown Mega Mix, which I really enjoyed. Somebody's in the attic probably messing about with whatever's in the loft. So that was like a couple of my tracks versus a couple of Black Winter's tracks, which I really enjoyed. And I also love doing the cover art as well. So if you haven't checked out the Lockdown Mega Mix, it's almost an hour long. It's basically an alternating mix of my tracks, so some of my favourite tracks with some of what I think are some of Black Winter's best tracks. And it's on the channel, so I would definitely go ahead and check that out if you want something to listen to, especially during your workouts. But yeah, that was something I just wanted to point out. And then I thought, you know what, I'm really sick of listening to the sub bass of Scrap God, so I went back into it. But instead of just tweaking the sub bass of Scrap God, I thought to myself, which out of all of my tracks have I done the best sub bass in? And the answer to that is quite simply Sriracha, right? So I did Sriracha. Let me scroll back. So Sriracha was about 9 months ago, which is a bit mad. And that's probably one of my favourite tracks so far, because just the general mix of Sriracha was really good. Like the overall sound quality of Sriracha was great. Unfortunately, it didn't, as I said, it didn't do as well as I wanted, but that's my fault because I didn't really promote it as much as I should have. No, that's fine. So what I did was I took the sub bass that I used in Sriracha and I basically just implanted it into Scrap God, redid the sub bass because the actual melody in terms of sub bass is different. The melody of Sriracha sub bass is slightly different to the melody of Scrap God sub bass, right? But I basically took the same sound design, redid the MIDI, and it was so much better. I did a bit of tweaking here and there as well, just to try and improve it. And honestly, I think it was a lot better. So I decided to call it the Scrap God Spicy Edition, because it uses Sriracha sub bass. So there you go. Also, it is a bit better in general. So I think what I'm going to end up doing is I'm going to redo Scrap God. I'm going to do like an extended edition, or part 2, as somebody suggested to me, where it's going to be, the first 2 drops are going to be the same, but instead of an outro, it's going to continue into something different. There might be an extra 2 drops, there might be just one more drop, I'm not really sure. And what I'm tempted to do is implement a little bit of Sriracha, but I'm not sure, because I could actually do that, but I want to see how that goes. So I think what I'm going to try and do is I'm going to try and extract the sound from Sriracha, the main drop melody that you hear. I'm going to see if I can put that into Scrap God. I'm going to see how it sounds, and then I'm going to decide if I'm going to do an extended mix or not. Because if it does sound good, then it really will sound good. So that might come soon. So that'll be, what is it? Scrap God Spicy Edition. That's going to be called. And that'll, if that does go well, then I probably will release that on Spotify as well. So we'll see what happens. So into the main topic of this podcast, which I say main topic, I'm going to try and finish up with it. The question is, why was I really so engrossed in all of these tracks? Is it because I was lazy? Is it because I didn't want to work on any new material? Well, that is partly true. It is much easier to kind of build upon previous material, but at the same time, it makes me feel a little bit lazy. It makes me feel a bit uncreative, because if I'm just taking Ghost God and just constantly doing like remixes or retakes of the track, then it's just going to seem like I'm just repeating the same thing over and over, which isn't what I want. But again, it's really hard to just keep flowing out like original ideas. It's really hard to just finish Ghost God and then straight away move on to another track, even with like all of the inspiration that you have online available to you. It's just difficult to straight away move on to another track. But the thing is, I really enjoyed Ghost God, and if you enjoy a track that much, you want to be able to kind of build on it again, because yes, it is easy, and if something is easy to do, and it will still benefit my channel, then I'll be more likely to do it. So that is essentially what I did later on when I did Scrap God. I wanted to redo Ghost God. I wanted to change it up a little bit, use the same elements because I enjoyed it a lot. But I didn't want it to be the exact same thing. I wanted it to be similar, and I wanted it to be obvious that I was using the same elements, right? But I wasn't just copying the track. It's not as simple as just saying, oh, this is basically just Ghost God, but kind of a bit different. No, it's a lot more than that. Scrap God is its own track. Even if it does use elements from Ghost God, it's still its own track, essentially, because it is mixed with a completely different track, and it is its own unique take as well. So, yeah. And then I did kind of, because I really enjoyed the cover art of Scrap Freak, I decided to use that a lot more, because you can see I obviously used that in the main Scrap Freak cover art. I also used a similar image in the Scrap Freak's Mega Mashup, right? So I made it look like the Scrap Freak was just listening to some music. And then I used a similar image for Scrap God, because that was essentially just supposed to be the Scrap Freak, but in a kind of monochrome light. And I did enjoy that cover art, and I just generally enjoy wearing the goggles and the face mask, because it is just a cool bit of cover art. It just looks badass. I think the original idea for Scrap God, the cover art, it was going to be like an image of the Scrap Freak character. It was going to be me with the goggles, the face mask, and just like a black shirt or something like that, kind of facing against this ghostly figure, right? It was going to be the Scrap Freak character versus the Ghost God, right? But then I realised that was a bit ambitious, so I just went with something a bit simpler. I blended together the Ghost God cover art with a new image, so it would make it a lot more original. It's no use just taking both original cover arts of Ghost God and Scrap Freak and just blending them together, because that would just look lazy. That really would look like just look like I hadn't put any effort into it. And I wanted it to be its own original track, so you got to put the right amount of effort into it. And I will admit that did take me a long time to cut out that image. That is just a pure cutout of the Scrap God. I don't think I have that image anymore, so that's a shame. Although I say that, I think I did actually, before I deleted it, I did use it for my new Spotify banner, so you can go check that out on the Spotify page. I'll leave that in the description. It's also in the link tree, which is in the description if you wish to check that out. So I think it's just a case of it is definitely part of the reason why I kept using those tracks is because I really, really enjoyed them, right? Part of the reason is because it was easy to do. And if something's, as I said, if something's easy to do for the channel, then I will be more inclined to do it, right? Then in terms of the remix, right? To the audience, unless I tell them, which is what I've done in this podcast, the audience don't know that I have that I asked Dragon Tree to do the remix. They might think that he decided to do that himself. They might think that he was the one that contacted me to do the remix, or he might have just done it and just given it to me. That's not how that works. If you want to remix somebody's stuff, you should ask them. You don't have to. Well, I mean, you should probably ask them. I think the general guideline is if you have the opportunity to ask someone if you wish to do a remix, right? Then you should ask them. I don't ask the bigger artists because I never actually release it commercially, so it's not really a big deal. But if it's like a track like this, then yeah, it's probably better to ask somebody. So I actually asked him if he could remix my track, obviously. And then, you know, he said yes, because we've worked together before, and it was, you know, it was one of those things where there's like a tiny little mutual relation, I guess. So he did that, and yeah, it just kind of helps fill out the channel a little bit. It sucks that the retro remix and the Dragon Tree remix were both next to each other, because that does look like I've kind of just padded it out with more Ghost God, like I'm just kind of spamming it. So if you want to meme that, then you can go ahead. But that's also true for Ghost Squad. They're all next to each other. So it's the Retro remix, then the Dragon Tree remix, then the Ghost Squad mega mix, right? That just looks like I've spammed Ghost God a couple of times. But the truth is, it's because I really wanted to stick with that theme on the channel. I really, really enjoyed doing Ghost God, and I wanted to be able to work on it in different ways. So if it does look like I spam the channel with that sort of thing, then I do apologise, but that isn't what I'm going for. It's just because I really enjoy this style of music, and I want it to continue on the channel and have like plenty of variation. Like you can be able to hear any of the different Ghost God style tracks and be like, oh my god, this is amazing. Oh, it's the Dragon Tree remix. Oh my god, I love this. That sort of thing. Because it is great to be able to hear the same track, but mixed in a different way. So yeah, in the future, I will probably do a different version of Scrap God. Reason being, because I want to, because I enjoyed Scrap God and Sriracha. I'm not going to blend them together. I'm not going to mix them the same way I did with Scrap God. It's just going to be Scrap God plus a little bit extra. It's just going to be like an extended edition with a slightly better sound design. But yeah, that's essentially going to be it for this podcast. I'm not sure what the next topic is going to be. It will most likely be to do with basically me talking about all of the tracks that I've done this year and kind of just rating them. I might also talk about why it is really difficult to be motivated when it comes to making music, and why is it so difficult to come up with ideas. And at some point in the future, I'm also going to talk about all of the collaborations that I've done with all of the different artists that I've worked with. So yeah, so that's going to cover it for this podcast, and I will see you guys next time. Bye.